Did you know an asteroid recently missed colliding with us here on Earth? I didn't. A space rock as big as a 10-story building with a speed of 9.9 miles per second could have crashed into us, but slipped past at the very last moment.
The first time we observed this asteroid with telescopes was on the 7th of this month, and when it passed closer to us than the moon, that was 2 days later. That was its close approach on the 9th. So 2 days pass and then it has its close approach. That's not a lot of time. Luckily enough, this one wasn't heading directly for us this time, but it sort of exposes sort of a vulnerability that we have, a little bit of a blind spot that sometimes we don't see them until they are right nearby, and the potential that can mean for us in terms of preparing for anything that is on a collision course for us.
Morgellons is not really a disease. It's a takeover of the body. It's a technological invasion of biological tissues that's going on. It has affected many, many people worldwide. And it starts with little lesions on the skin that are like, if anyone has ever seen a carbuncle, it's similar to a boil, but it craters into the skin. And that's typically a staph infection. But it can also start with the body issuing shards of what seem like glass or sand. There's a lot of silica and quartz involved. There's a lot of synthetic polymers in the form of fibers. These pockmarks tend not to be resolved easily, and dermatologists will tell you that you have dermatitis or folliculitis, but they will not treat for this in any successful way. So people are pretty much left on their own. From the aerosol spraying, we are getting materials that descend into the environment. There's a lot of aluminum, barium, strontium hitting the ground and affecting the pH of the soil. There are also synthetic fibers in the fallout, the environmental fallout. These fibers eventually take up residence in the skin, and they are very, very traceable in the Morgellons lesions. And these are fibers that don't match anything in a university or research facility database. Puffballs, they're called. They're definitely synthetic. Also, in the materials that fall out of the sky are desiccated erythrocytes, red blood cells, in dried form. The fibers actually can make the blood cells within them. So something is happening. They are shiny materials, they glitter, they're definitely technological, and this is being made in the human body out of lesions. I knew then that this is what it was about. It was about transhumanism, and it was about the marriage of man, biological tissue, with technology, especially nanotech. This Morgellons syndrome is really, really darkly and deeply experimental. They range from bugs like grasshoppers with little black eyes, moths, gnats, centipedes, which are purple, and then bark and leaves that look like twigs, and real stuff coming from nature. And all of this is being manufactured in the body, in tubules. So I am wondering if somehow in the body a changeover is taking place, a program that comes in such that the body is being used to create synthetic materials. I wonder if the human body is going to be used to make the life forms. You know, they are eradicating the natural world slowly by all kinds of assaults, such that biology will serve technology forever. This Morgellons is a program. The human being, living things will be the fuel through piezoelectricity. So what they've managed to do is create artificial haze. They're blanketing the planet. We don't see natural cloud forms very often any longer. We see synthetic cirrus. We see a ton of very milky haze that is altering the effect of sunlight. This is a big, big, big stage. You're seeing a new generation of children and young people who have no problem with technologies. They drag their iPhones around everywhere. They're going to think that to be enhanced technologically, to have a chip in your brain such that you don't have to Google anything, because all you have to do is think the question and boom, comes a flood of answers, is going to be cool. It's going to be fantastic. Well, what those kids don't realize, Richie, and this is the sad thing, is that they're not going to have working reproductive organs. The frequencies are blowing out our biology. These phones are rattling through us at, 1 billion, 2 billion. Wi-Fi is 2.4 billion, and who's without it today? They're going to have state-supervised or lab-assisted reproduction if they have any gender at all, right? We're into the transgender And so all this will be normal for them. They will be happy to have technology help them conceive, or better yet, technology produce a human being. We live in a very compressed, very unpleasant third dimension, and we are multidimensional. We have a way out, but it's not necessarily in the third dimension. We have to call upon ourselves. I mean, life has been given to us. This is a gift. It's from that we have to draw our power. We have to reclaim our power. We have to realize that we are magnificent. Even though we feel very small and helpless and our bank account is, languishing and we've got too much stress and too much illness, we still can ascend above that.
I think that's what's going to happen in 2017, is that this hologram that we've been living is going to be, the curtain's going to be pulled back. Right, in one word, credit, or the lack of credit. Think about how credit works. If you were a lender, would you lend to someone that you know is broke? And that's what this amounts to. The U.S. is broke. There's nothing left unencumbered. Pension plans are hollow. They're filled with debt, bad debt that can't be paid back. Keep in mind that one man's debt is another man's asset, or one man's liability is another man's asset. And if the liability, if the debt can't be paid, then on the other side of the balance sheet, the assets have to be marked down. The world spins, the world turns on credit. And I've written many times, I've said in interviews many times, that when credit dries up, so will distribution. And when distribution dries up, food doesn't make it to the stores, and you're going to have hungry people. When credit dries up, when credit ceases, and trucks don't move, and store shelves don't get filled, and EBT cards don't work, ATMs don't work, nothing works, you're going to see mass riots in the cities. And the cities will be ring-fenced, and people will gladly get on buses to go get food at FEMA camps.
dass 2017 das Jahr des ganz bösen Erwachens werden wird. Weil was wir jetzt sehen, das sind alles künstlich aufgeblähte Blasen an den Märkten, die irgendwann platzen müssen. Die Zentralbanken pumpen im Moment unendlich viel Geld in die Märkte hinein und halten die so auf diese Art und Weise am Leben. Das ist aber nichts, was aus der Realwirtschaft entsteht oder was durch normales Wachstum erzeugt wird. Die EZB druckt ja im Moment noch 80 Milliarden im Monat, hat bisher in den letzten 1,5 oder 2 Jahren ungefähr über 1 Billion ins System reingepumpt. Also das ist alles nur künstlich am Leben erhalten und dieses Geld muss dann irgendwann, wird das entwertet werden. Also wir sehen bisher keine große Inflation, weil diese Inflation sich an den Märkten abspielt, die der Normalbürger nicht mitbekommt. Das Ergebnis dieses ganzen Prozesses ist entweder ein Zerplatzen des gesamten Systems oder eine Hyperinflation. An dieser Alternative kommt man einfach nicht vorbei. Also da wird einiges passieren. Und dann mit dem Präsidentenwechsel in den USA wird auch einiges passieren. Meine große Befürchtung ist, dass es im Nahen Osten in den nächsten Monaten zu einem ganz großen Krieg kommen wird. Also ich denke, der Ölpreis muss in die Höhe getrieben werden und diesen Ölpreis kann man nur in die Höhe treiben, indem man so und so viele Ölquellen im Nahen Osten kaputt macht. Und ich glaube, das wird auch das Programm von Donald Trump sein, wenn der an die Macht kommt. Also Donald Trump hat die Richtung der amerikanischen Politik, wird er verändern. Also er wird Russland aus dem Fadenkreuz herausnehmen und wird dieses Fadenkreuz in Richtung Nahen Osten verschieben. Und die amerikanische Finanzindustrie braucht unbedingt einen höheren Ölpreis. Und die werden ihre Armee einsetzen, um diesen höheren Ölpreis zu erzeugen. Also das große Problem von Trump wird sein, dass er ja in den Wahlen sehr viel Versprechungen gemacht hat. Vor allen Dingen hat er Versprechungen gemacht, die Arbeitsplätze nach Amerika zurückzuholen. Und das wird alles nicht funktionieren. Also Trumps Programm ist nicht realisierbar und die Leute werden das sehr bald bemerken und es wird eine sehr große Ernüchterung eintreten. Die soziale Schere weitet sich immer mehr. Also das sind Sachen, die auf keinen Fall einfach so am Volk vorbeigehen werden, sondern die werden in der Zukunft auch eine Rolle spielen. Also im Moment muss man sagen, dass das gesamte Finanzgefüge und zu diesem gesamten Finanzgefüge gehören eben nicht nur die USA und die EU, sondern auch China und Russland, dass das gesamte Finanzgefüge wirklich auf sehr tönernen Füßen steht. Ob es nun 2017 zusammenbrechen wird oder später, das lässt sich im Moment nicht sagen.
What truly matters is not which party controls our government, but whether our government is controlled by the people. The establishment protected itself, but not the citizens of our country. And while they celebrated in our nation's capital, there was little to celebrate for struggling families all across our land. We've defended other nations' borders while refusing to defend our own. We will seek friendship and goodwill with the nations of the world, but we do so with the understanding that it is the right of all nations to put their own interests first. We will reinforce old alliances and form new ones and unite the civilized world against radical Islamic terrorism, which we will eradicate completely from the face of the earth. If I win, I am going to instruct my Attorney General to get a special prosecutor to look into your situation, because there has never been so many lies, so much deception. There has never been anything like it.
It's just awfully good that someone with the temperament of Donald Trump is not in charge of the law in our country.
Because you'd be in jail. You know, I'll tell you, there is something that I wanted to say, because I was very honored, very, very honored, when I heard that President Bill Clinton and Secretary Hillary Clinton was coming today, and I think it's appropriate to say, and I'd like you to stand up. And honestly, there's nothing more I can say, because I have a lot of respect for those two people. So thank you all for being here.
The most important aspect of Trump is that he is 100% owned by Israel, owned in his mind as well as possibly, probably literally. Because if you look at his appointments, he has handed the American economy to Zionists. He's handed it to Steve Mnuchin as Treasury Secretary, Goldman Sachs' longtime partner. He's handed it to Gary Cohn, president of Goldman Sachs, who he's made director of his National Economic Council. And then you look at his ambassador to Israel, a right-wing zealot called David Friedman, really right out there, so far right he meets himself coming back. But on the other hand, I think another key word in the Trump presidency is Iran. He's made statements about Iran that are not complimentary. He's put in to the Pentagon as defense secretary this guy with the extraordinary nickname Mad Dog, Mattis, who's publicly said how much he enjoys killing people, what fun it is. He is vehemently anti-Iran. He's got this guy Michael Flynn as national security advisor, who is vehemently anti-Iran. And then you've got Israel and Netanyahu, a close friend of Trump, who is vehemently anti-Iran. And this is why they were all kicking off over this nuclear agreement with Iran, because that's not the idea, to have good relations with Iran. So when you look at that from the Trump point of view, I think that's going to be a key word, Iran, as well as Israel. And of course, the other word, which is China. I mean, this guy's not even in office and he's kicked off a row with China. Donald Trump doesn't have skeletons in the cupboard. He has whole cemeteries, right? If they wanted to destroy him, they could have destroyed him. They didn't destroy him.
Yeah.
The Republican Party could have destroyed him. They didn't destroy him. So I don't buy this, any of this outsider stuff. He's just another mask on the same face, and he's just telling you what you want to hear, so they can get in, and then it will be business as usual. You know, a significant part of the alternative media, it calls itself alternative, in the United States, has got behind Trump and pushed and promoted him. Now, for me, the alternative media is not there to take political sides. It's there to question everything, and it's there to point out that it's the system and how it works and what is behind it in the shadows that is driving world events and the direction of the world.
Bien, por lo pronto existe enorme incertidumbre. ¿Por qué? Porque desde el punto de vista de la retórica, de la lexis, Trump ha sido transgresor. Y en forma por lo menos aparente se ha mostrado como anti-establishment. De todas maneras, yo considero que eso es una mise en scène, ¿verdad? Es una teatralización. Los poderes corporatocráticos manejan muy bien el sistema, el método hegeliano de la acción-reacción, y la manipulación del pueblo de los Estados Unidos es bastante sencilla y se puede realizar a través de los grandes medios de comunicación, pero también se puede realizar a través de la tecnotrónica, es decir, la tecnología al servicio del poder, penetrando lisa y llanamente en una metodología invasiva en la psiquis de los seres humanos y direccionando el pensamiento. Entonces, yo no tengo esperanzas con respecto a cambios estructurales, tanto en el ámbito interno de Estados Unidos como en su proyección como potencia gendarme del mundo. Porque quiero destacar eso. Estados Unidos en realidad es el patotero. Estados Unidos es el brazo gordo. Quien lo manda son los amos del mundo. Es decir, es ese poder anglosajón, sionista, masónico, de corte fundamentalmente financiero. Por lo tanto, yo voy a arriesgar una hipótesis, y es que precisamente hay a largo plazo un proyecto de sustitución de esa funcionalidad de gendarme internacional de las dinastías financieras de Estados Unidos hacia China.
Y hay que, me permitiría acercar el siguiente factor que es clave, que se llama Gran Bretaña. Porque Gran Bretaña, yo no creo que sea casualidad que se salió de la Unión Europea, que es un proyecto fracasado. La Unión Europea y el euro son dos proyectos fracasados, y el tercer proyecto fracasado es la OTAN. Ahora, el hecho de que Gran Bretaña se haya salido de la Unión Europea la liberó, le dejó las manos libres para decir, bueno, vamos a volver durante 10, 15, 20 años, una generación y medio, a nuestra tradición de ser el imperio global más experto, 5 siglos de experiencia, que ha visto la historia moderna. Y ahí es donde, creo yo, desde la City londinense, se va a poder administrar este traslado paulatino, complejo, hacia China, que ahí la Casa Rothschild, con traslados enormes de oro físico, está cumpliendo una función vital. Y el punto de ingreso y salida se llama Hong Kong.
¿Qué va a pasar con esas tendencias reactivas al status quo del establishment actual? yo creo que en última instancia van a terminar dando un giro y siendo más de lo mismo. Tiene que haber una esperanza. No podemos caer en ese escepticismo, decir no se puede, porque bueno, de lo contrario vamos a la paralización, vamos al miedo, y eso no debe ser el discurso imperante. Por eso me siento regocijado de un análisis inteligente, serio, fundado, que diga, no, cuidado, se puede. Tenemos que buscar, tal vez exacerbar ese descontrol fruto de tanto poder que acumulan, ¿verdad?
I just don't know what Trump is going to do. It seems that all the noises he's made suggest that he wants to do a deal with Russia. That makes a lot of sense from everyone's point of view. There's a great deal of pressure on him not to do that. He seems to be resisting it. But all this is speculation. I would have thought, listening to President Putin's remarks and Trump's remarks, that a deal is in the offing. And that's a very, very good thing. If there's not going to be a war between Russia and the United States. Now, what about China? Mr. Trump seems to divide the world between Russia and China. Good Russia, bad China. Isn't it a disgrace that in 2017 we're all held to hostage to what the President of the United States is about to do, when in fact the world is changing? Russia has now reclaimed its independence. China has reclaimed its independence. A whole new hinterland of the world is opening up, and yet we're sitting here worried about what the President of the United States will do. Quite rightly, because he has this enormous military power. The United States' biggest business is war. The United States usually only attacks defenseless countries. It rarely attacks countries that can stand up for itself. That's why this reckless provocation on the western borders of Russia and in the Asia-Pacific against China is slightly unusual. It's taking it up to another level of risk and provocation.
mexicano Peña Nieto ha suspendido su visita a Donald Trump prevista para la semana que viene. Trump ya le había animado a suspenderla después de que Peña Nieto asegurara que no pagará el muro fronterizo de Trump.
So what we're seeing right now is a coordinated effort to basically take everything that the government does not want people sharing online and slap labels on it of hate speech, cyberbullying, fake news, and now Russian propaganda. They're just going to mix that all together in a giant ball and justify censoring it. And you can see when you take a step back and really look at what's going on, how coordinated this effort really is. It's just gotten really insane, a total Orwellian clampdown. On November 22nd, the House introduced a bill that specifically had a section in there about Russian propaganda, which was passed on November 30. So they introduced the bill, and 8 days later, they're already passing it. In it, there's Title V, Matters Relating to Foreign Countries, Section 501, which calls for the U.S. government to, quote, counter active measures by Russia to exert covert influence. And then they have a list of media manipulation, and they specifically mention disinformation and forgeries. So that's another way of saying fake news. Right at the same time that the House was introducing this bill, on November 24th, you had Washington Post put out this article about how experts are saying that the Russian propaganda effort helped spread fake news during the election, and they're referencing this website here called Propaganda or Not, which is a completely anonymous website, and if you take a look at this list, you'll quickly see all of the alternative media is on there, along with WikiLeaks, DC Leaks, RT. It's just all mixed up together. Everybody you can think of that would ever say anything negative about the American government. Nobody knows who's behind this, but for a website that's so-called experts, this is how they figure out who propaganda is. They sent out this tweet on November 19th saying pretty much anybody hating on Soros is echoing Russian propaganda. It's a good rule of thumb. So according to the so-called experts at Prop or Not, if you hate on Soros and have anything negative to say about him, you're echoing Russian propaganda. That's experts, supposedly. It's pretty clear this is not a group of experts, but more like a group of paid agitators. But this is what's happening, and it's going to continue happening. So what people need to do is try to figure out where to go instead, because YouTube and Facebook and Twitter, these platforms are going to be more and more heavily censored to the point that it's going to be very hard to share information.
Destroying alternative media is now a primary objective of the establishment. That's what so-called fake news is all about. It's an effort to get people to stop reading social media, countering propaganda put out by the establishment. The U.S. government has used the media for its war propaganda for more than 100 years. William Randolph Hearst worked with the government to get the Spanish-American War going. He ran sensationalistic stories about the Spanish occupation of Cuba to raise public support for the war. War propaganda became a science by the time the United States entered the First World War. President Woodrow Wilson established America's Committee on Public Information. It was run by the State Department and the Army and the Navy. During the Second World War, the media played a direct role in creating propaganda. FDR created the Office of War Information. It worked with the state and war departments and the media, including Hollywood, newspapers, and radio stations. In the early 1950s, the CIA created its Operation Mockingbird takeover of the corporate media. The foreign policy objectives of the ruling elite were disseminated by corporate newspapers and media. But the internet came along and changed everything. Alternative media now has a viable platform. By the late 1990s, dozens of sites were appearing weekly, challenging the corporate media. Every day, millions of people around the world get information that challenges the official narratives of government. The U.S. government routinely invents lies to cover its false flag attacks. In addition to the lies about Saddam Hussein and Iraq, the government used its premier propaganda outlet, the New York Times, to lie about the Gulf of Tonkin incident, which never occurred. More recently, the establishment lied about Syria and Libya. It blames Bashar al-Assad and the Russians for the carnage there. It refuses to mention that Assad tried to negotiate peace and the Syrian constitution was changed in 2012 to end the Ba'ath Party monopoly on power. Assad offered amnesty to the so-called rebels, but this received little coverage. The New York Times and the establishment media consistently portray murderous Islamic radicals as moderates. The media also said Assad gassed his own people. It then refused to report the sarin attack in Syria was attributed to al-Qaeda. It also claims without a shred of evidence Assad and Russia are helping the Islamic State. The so-called fake news narrative is the latest attempt by the establishment to undercut the influence of alternative media. Facebook, Google, and Twitter agreed to work with the elite to scrub alternative media from their social media platforms.
What they've done here is they've tried to create a dialectic, basically a binary conversation. So they come up with a list saying these are all fake news websites, for instance, and then anything that's not on the list is presumed as real news. So essentially this is a virtual book burning exercise for the 21st century. Who's behind it? The biggest purveyors of actual fake news. I'm talking about the establishment corporate media, I'm talking about academia, and I'm talking about government itself. I have a endless list from Iraq to Libya to Syria. They've got every single major event wrong. The Ukraine, the Iran-Contra cocaine gate in the 80s, every single thing they've got wrong. And that has cost lives. Hundreds of thousands, if not millions of innocent lives have been lost because of the New York Times, the Washington Post, and their collusion with the deep state, okay? They are responsible. There's blood on their hands for Syria, for Libya, and for Iraq, okay? They've lost control of the narrative, they've lost control of the internet, and so they want to attack the real diarists of the 21st century. These are bloggers, independent media people that hold no allegiance to corporations or power structures. So this is, the reaction of it is extraordinary.
So you know that the mainstream media is faking the news. Now that you know that, ask yourself this question. Did they only just now start faking the news? Or does it make more sense to realize they've been faking the news all along? They've been faking the news for as long as they've been in existence. It's just that only now they've lost control of the narrative. Think back about all the big events that occurred in your lifetime, big events of history that you remember. You might remember the day JFK was shot. You might remember the Oklahoma City bombing. You might remember 9/11. You might remember even more recent events like the Sandy Hook shooting or other so-called mass shootings where we lied to about all these events in history because the mainstream media controlled the narrative. And the answer I invite you to explore is probably so. Yeah, they were probably lying about aspects of all these big events throughout history. Doesn't mean that everything they said was a lie. There were certainly elements of truth. They always try to blend truth with lies so that their lies seem credible. It's time for us all to rethink the entire history that we've been taught. So if you live in the bubble of fake news, you love CNN, you love NPR. But if you live in reality, then you love the independent media because that's where you're waking up. That's where you're growing. As an adult, as a responsible citizen, you're learning more. You're expanding your knowledge. You're developing your critical thinking skills. You're asking the questions that the free press is supposed to ask.
What have you got there, Smith?
This photograph was between the pages of the Gazette.
What photograph?
Jones and Rutherford. They confessed to aiding the underground and being in Eurasia during Hate Week. But here it says...
What are you talking about, Smith? I don't see any photograph. No photograph of the traitors Jones and Rutherford exists, does it?
No.
The system is not perfect. Sometimes there are errors.
I don't know if you've noticed, but the war is actually begun. We are in the midst of the media wars. And the time for standing idly by and not choosing a side has already come and gone. There is no time for sitting on the fence. We are now in a position of actual combat. And the alternative media cannot do it alone, because the alternative media is you. It's not that we rely on your support, it's that you are the resistance. You are the alternative media, and you are making the choice right now whether you're going to continue supporting the propaganda establishment with your time, your energy, and your money, or whether you're going to start supporting the alternative media.
scientific community has been busy since the end of the Industrial Revolution. There have been dozens, perhaps hundreds of US and international patents dealing directly with electrokinetics and electrogravitics, going back to the turn of the last century. It would be safe to assume private industry and the military have also been working on a great deal of related applications off the public record.
In the middle of last century, physicists made an astounding discovery, and that is what we ordinarily consider empty space isn't empty at all. Even if you go to the far reaches of outer space, it turns out that rather than emptiness, what we call the vacuum is really a seething cauldron of what we call quantum energy or zero-point energy. Zero point just simply means that even if you froze the entire universe down to absolute zero, froze out all motion, where everything would be as quiet as you could possibly get it, this energy is still there. It was predicted by the mathematics of quantum theory, but the numbers were so large. For example, there's enough energy in the volume of a coffee cup to evaporate the world's oceans.
So in a sense, if you find the right way to do it, you can actually sort of reduce the mass of an object. If you can do that, then of course it takes less propulsive force to push it around. So it really enables the possibility of being able to go faster than the speed of light without violating general relativity. And that was the most fascinating aspect of the whole thing.
You're drawing energy from the environment, and in the process of doing that, you're enabling the craft to not only demass itself, but use, basically conserve energy by using the flux in the vacuum of space-time as a power source for your propulsion system.
Most scientists, with an instant response, would think on special relativity terms and say, well, the velocity of light is a limitation. You can't go faster than the speed of light. And therefore, to conceive of us exploring stars or other people coming here, it's too far. They just can't get from here to there. We might explore our own solar system, but that's probably as far as we're going to get. But the truth of the matter is that in general relativity, that's not the case. There are options there.
The real issue becomes, is this new technology something that's so advanced and so far out there that it's really beyond the scope of our modern civilization? Is this something that's so hard to achieve that it requires such a tremendous amount of development that it would cause the economy to collapse? Or is it a real threat to existing forms of energy like oil, coal, nuclear, wind power?
You've actually heard a couple different stories about people being shut down when they're trying to implement this.
Or killed.
Yeah.
The storyline basically is that there's a lot of work going on in the aerospace industry that would indicate that we have black projects that have gone even darker, and that there's work being done on electrogravitic, on scalar technology, etc., that we don't even think that those in Congress or even in the military that approve black budgets are aware of.
I've seen copies of inter-office correspondence among defense contractors that openly stated that they felt the technology was a fundamental enabling technology, that it had all kinds of different defense applications, but it also had a lot of serious civilian applications that would be beneficial to humanity as a whole, to the environment. It seems obvious that someone, perhaps a group, maybe some kind of a rogue civilization within our society has captured the technology. They're exploiting it for their own aims, for their own interests, whatever those might be. There's not a sliver of doubt in my mind that it exists, that it's being exploited in some way, whether it's for intelligence collection, whether it's for logistical support, whether it's for retrieval of raw materials from the asteroid belt. I have no idea why or what it's used for. All I know is that it's extremely advanced. It's being used more and more. So, you're kind of left with, a big question mark as to, where's all this advanced technology going and what's it being used for? If there was somebody that had this sort of interstellar trade program going on with another civilization, that would be very interesting, but I can't understand why they would want to keep that quiet. It would seem like such a mind-expanding, enlightening thing for people to know about. Maybe we'd stop shooting at each other and start thinking about how can we get along with the people on, stars, star systems, that are around us.
the simple part that most people don't understand is that every thought we think and every word we speak is creating our future. It's as though our thoughts go out into the universe and are accepted and brought back to us as experience. Now that is a very simple thing, but most people don't get it. They don't understand it. They've never heard it before and they think it's ridiculous. But if you can really accept the fact that every time you think a thought and every time you speak a word, you are literally painting your future, making your dinner, whatever you want to call it, you are creating. And you're creating your own life. And this is simple, but it's not easy to accept. But once you accept it, then you can start deliberately creating what you want in your life. And you begin to be aware of what you don't want in your life and how you are contributing to it. See, most of us just think, and we don't pay any attention to what we're thinking. We're just doing it. But that's something you need to train yourself to do, to begin to train yourself to be aware of what you're thinking. And one of the ways to do that is to periodically say to yourself, what am I thinking? Would I like this thought to create my life? Would I like to have the experience that this thought could bring to me? Now, it takes a while to do that, but even if we could begin on the smallest level to be aware of our thinking, we can start to make changes. To begin with, you start by doing what we call doing affirmations, and that is making positive statements about your life that are positive, and you do them deliberately. If you think of doing your positive affirmations is like planting a seed in the ground. It's not necessarily true at the moment, but it is something you want to have be true. So you put the seed in, and you plant a seed and you expect it to grow. And you don't wait 2 days and then dig in the earth and say, what's happening, what's happening? You expect that thing to grow because you know there's a law and a process. And the seed will grow if it is in the right soil and it has the right amount of moisture. Making it really a habit and doing it every day, doing something every morning when you wake up, that's a really good time. And another good time is when you go to sleep at night. And gratitude works a lot. Just being grateful for everything. The more, I always say the universe loves gratitude. The more you're grateful for what the good is in your life, the more good you get to be grateful about. Mm-hmm. Well, there are lots of things you can do to help you become more conscious of what is going on. And because so many of our belief systems really are unconscious or subconscious, we're not aware of them. They're just things that were bred into us as we were children, is to take a little time to figure out what they are. So you can really begin to realize what you do believe about these things. So you can't change your thoughts if you don't know what your thoughts are. There is a law of thinking, and we are beginning to learn about it. And it is like a computer. If you have this gorgeous computer put in front of you, and you don't know what to do with it, it's a piece of junk. But if you learn the language of the computer, miracles happen. And that is what the law of thinking is. When you learn how it works, miracles happen.